Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. A new TABE for a new era. It's an update from the Data Recognition Corporation, DRC. Today we have Mike Johnson and Christine Kirk joining us so that we can offer you this presentation and you can ask questions and ask anything that you want to find out regarding TABE or TABE Class-E. There's lots of resources that Mike's going to talk about today. So he's going to refer to the TABE, tabetest.com. And also I want to remind you of IPDA's TABE Assistance Center, where there's lots of resources there for TABE. But in the meantime, before we get started and I turn it over to Mike, I just want to remind you that your microphones are muted and all of the resources that we present today, including the PowerPoint, are already downloaded on the IPDA website. This webinar is being recorded. It will be archived for you to use at a later date. And you have the option, as I said, to ask questions. Please use the Q&A option on your screen to ask those questions. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to really deliver this webinar to us in Florida. We really appreciate it very much. Mike?
Okay, thank you, June, and thank you to IPDA for hosting this. I'll go ahead and get started by advancing the slides, so you should see it change to kind of the agenda that we have for today. We'll talk about both TABE 11 and 12 and TABE Class-E Online. They are fairly interchangeable from the operation, so if you're familiar with one, you're going to be pretty familiar with the other version of TABE Online, whether it's 11 and 12 or Class-E. We'll talk about some remote testing. We'll talk about some new updates for TABE 11 and 12 and Class-E separately. But if there is a specific question that you would like to address, you can certainly use the chat right now to document that question, and I can address it either when we get to that part of the presentation or at the Q&A at the end. We may also take the questions offline if you do need some extra attention to the question, but I encourage you to put your questions into the chat ahead of time, and we can certainly address those as we go forward. I want to mention first the resources, and June started that off in the introduction, that we do have a lot of TABE resources that are available, and the majority of them are available at our public website of tabetest.com. I'm going to switch over to that real quick, and you should see the TABE website come up on your screen. This is again our public website for all TABE and TABE Class-E related information. The majority of the information that is helpful for resources is listed under the resource tab, and I'll just go through a few of them real quick. Under TABE 11 and 12, we have several sublinks. One of them in the middle is related to the math test. If you're interested in downloading all the formulas and the reference sheets for the math test, those are available in TABE Online. They are built in and they're available as a click on icon within the test. But if you want to have a hard copy available, they are downloadable right from our website. Another resource, as I go back to the main site under the TABE 11 and 12, is, oops, let me go that back there, to go to our blueprints and practice items and testing times. You can open up any of those, and I'll open up the blueprints as I have on previous webinars, just to show you the blueprints and where they're at and what's important on the blueprints themselves. There is a blueprint for every level of TABE, and it helps you understand what's on that specific level. And as I'll open up, let me go to the math. And normally I use math level A, but I'll switch to math level M on this blueprint, and I'll make it full screen for us here real quick.
Mike, we're not seeing the actual website, so if you share just the PowerPoint, you might want to share your desktop.
I will share my whole desktop this time. Sure. Should see it pop up.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I apologize for that. We have the blueprint for math level M. And it starts out on the blueprint with a pie chart, and can look a little confusing and look like there's a lot of material to cover. And what it is demonstrating is what content areas from the College of Career Readiness Standards are covered on the specific level of the test. So again, we're on level M of math, and there's quite a few sections that are being covered. If you're familiar with the College of Career Readiness Standards, and TABE level M is kind of in that middle area. So you're addressing some beginning skills, some intermediate skills, and starting to introduce some advanced skills. The blueprint, if you look at it at a high level, you can see half the test is taken up by 3 areas: measurement and data, numbers and operation of base 10, and number operation of fractions. So, you know, we can say that the majority of the test is in those 3 areas. If we want to scroll down to the shaded colored areas, the first one is measurement and data. We can then look here within that measurement and data, we have a few medium emphasis areas and a couple low emphasis. And if I scroll down to, go down a little bit further here to the bottom, we can start to see that some of the other areas may be all low emphasis or just a couple of medium emphases. And that's indicative of level M of TABE being in the middle of the content area from the College of Career Readiness perspective. So maybe a lot of different areas that are being touched on, but a low emphasis indicates not many questions related to that specific sub-skill on the full test. So if I'm a teacher or a curriculum planner and I'm looking at what areas to really emphasize, we can certainly start if there's any high emphasis areas, and then go to the medium emphasis areas, knowing that that's where the majority of the questions are coming from. Let's close this and go back to our public website real quick. So you should see the website again for all the different blueprints that are available. Under that resource tab, just in case that wasn't sharing at the time, I'll show you again where that math formula sheet under TABE 11 and 12, under TABE Math, that's where the reference sheets are stored. So again, I'll open that real quick, and you can see that the formula sheets are available for every level of TABE in one file. So if you're downloading this, you can open up a specific page for whatever level of TABE that you're working with as a teacher. Some of the other areas on the public website that are useful under the resources is our tutorial for online testing. It's called our online tools training. It's about 3/4 of the way down on the reference menu, the resource menu. And if I open up the tutorial, it will go ahead and walk you through the process of accessing the free tutorial for online testing. It's available for both TABE 11 and 12 and TABE CLAS-E Online. If we go into the tutorial at the bottom where it says click here, and it will open up what looks to be the student testing window from our TABE testing platform. But one thing you'll notice is that there is only the online tools training listed. There is not the login listed for the students. So if we click on that online tools training, we'll have both the 11 and 12 tutorials and the CLAS-E tutorials. I'll open up math real quick, and I'll open up the level A tutorial. And just to open up that, I type in the username and password that's provided on the screen. And it will walk me through the directions. The big difference between paper and pencil testing and computer-based testing for TABE and TABE CLAS-E is that the students will walk themselves through the directions for the most part, and they can continue and move forward as the directions indicate for them. All students will be presented with a menu of tests that have been assigned to them. In this case, I've only been assigned the math tutorial at level A, so that's the only one that's showing. But if you were to schedule reading and listening for CLAS-E or math and reading for TABE 11 and 12, that would show up in this area for the student to select from. So within this math test, again, the student will start with the directions on how to access the tutorial, how to mark their questions for the tutorial as well, and then go ahead and then the navigation features for the tutorial. Finally, on the last screen, they're presented 3 circles to say that their computer is operating correctly, and then they can begin the test. I won't go into all the parts of the test, but across the top, there's a menu bar for tools, and they can use a highlighter if they choose. They could increase the magnification if they would like to. There's also a line guide. If this was a reading test, the line guide might help them read with a straight edge. And as I mentioned earlier, the formula sheet is a reference tool on the toolbar. This is the level A formula sheet, so it pops up the specific one for this test. They also have a sticky note. If they'd like to take notes instead of using white paper, they can do that on a sticky note, and they could take a note there and have it move around the page if they choose to. On the bottom of the screen, let me close out some of these areas. On the bottom of the screen, there is the options menu to allow them to change the color and font if they want. So we can look at a different background or use the background and the font at the same time and change the color and background. This is available for both Class-E online and for TABE 11 and 12 online. If we go ahead and mark an answer, we can move ahead to the next question. And I'll mark another answer real quick. Up at the top, we have a number bar that shows us that there are 7 questions for this tutorial. These are the same 7 questions that start out with the samples within the actual TABE Level A test. So by going through the tutorial, you're familiarizing the student with what they're first going to see when they go into the actual test as the sample questions. I'm not going to answer any more. I'm going to hit the green button at the bottom and go right to my review screen. And my review screen will tell me that I've answered the first 2 questions and skip the rest of them. And I can go ahead at the bottom and return to the questions, or I can simply end the test where I'm at and let it get scored. I do have to double confirm that I want to submit my test, and now it can take me back to that tutorial screen. And I'm going to go back to our main screen. And this time I'm going to switch over to a Class-E tutorial for reading real quick. I'll do level 2 reading, and I'll do the standard instead of the text to speech, and I'll enter my password. And again, I'll see the instructions for this reading tutorial. I'll see my menu for the reading tutorial test, and then my actual directions to enter in and the 3 circles for that. You'll notice now I've switched over to the ESOL test for TABE Class-E under reading, and it is still the same window. So students that might migrate from TABE Class-E to TABE 11 and 12 will be very familiar with the user interface for the testing window. They have the same access to the highlighter, the sticky notes, the magnifying glass, the line guide. This is not a math test, so there's no calculator or reference guide there for them to use. In Class-E, we do give them the option to listen to the correct answer for the sample questions only. Obviously, would not have that for the official test, but the students, if they do have headphones, would be able to listen to the correct answer in TABE Class-E online. I'm going to go move forward to the next question. And again, we can see this is a reading question where they're being asked the meaning of this passage. And this is a short sample, just 2 questions, and they can go ahead and review that to go back to the questions or be exiting out of the sample. And so as I get back to the menu again, just know that you have access. It's a public website to go through all the tutorials for 11 and 12 or all the tutorials for Class-E. Now in Florida, most of the programs, and as required by the state, reading and listening are the required sections. You can choose to do writing and speaking. They do require local scoring with the rubrics for the writing and the speaking portions. And there's some additional resources on our website for those rubrics. I'm going to point out a couple of other points on the website, but then mention them in the PowerPoint. Under the resource tab, you'll notice that there's a TABE, the High School Equivalency Concordance. We'll address that during the PowerPoint as well. And then also any order forms that you might need for any TABE related areas. There is also an order form as we talk a little bit later about using ProctorU for remote proctoring. We'll talk about that as an option. But I wanted to point out where you can find out the ProctorU information under the order forms. And then lastly, under resources, there is a larger heading for TABE remote proctoring. And this screen will open up with all of our resources related to remote proctoring. So you can go right to the remote proctoring link within the resource tab and have access to our device readiness check, any frequently asked questions, information related to ProctorU, and information for doing the local proctoring with your own webinar. So all of that is located in one easy, concise place. I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint and move forward with the presentation. I also want to talk a little bit about the average times and testing times. I know some programs always are concerned with the time needed for TABE testing, and I have in the regular font the allotted time, so 100 minutes for reading, 55 minutes for language, and 65 minutes for math. But I also have in bold the average times we're seeing for students taking the online test in TABE 11 and 12. We'll also publish shortly average times for Class-E, but right now most programs are just starting with the online version of Class-E to capture those times. But you can see most students are finishing reading within 75 minutes. Most finished math within 40 to 45 minutes of their allotted time in the online environment. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Insight portal is our access point for both Class-E Online and TABE 11 and 12 online. So if you're using TABE 11 and 12 already on our online platform, using Class-E for ESL students is very easy to do. It's the same platform, the same process for creating test sessions and registering students. When you do log into the home screen of our portal, you're always welcomed in with a message that may have some updates. So you'll see some bold font on the screen that allows us to provide any updates for you. There's also some links at the bottom that allow you to go to our website. And over on the middle page, we also have the middle to the top right, our 800 number for our support team, and they're available. I'll have that 800 number a little bit later in the presentation on its own slide, so you'll be able to copy that down as well. One thing I wanted to point out as a kind of an update within TABE Online for TABE 11 and 12 specifically is our feature for recommending the next test level. And I'll use the word recommending again, not requiring the next test level, but it is an attempt to work within many state policies and different policy rules to help point you towards the best possible test for the next test for a student. On the screen, we have an image from our test management section of TABE Online, and we have created a test session at the top with TABE 11, including reading, math, and language. And we've specifically not used the locator. We're going to schedule specific levels. So we're using level D for reading, level D for math, and level D for language. And I've added some students to the bottom of the screen. One of my available students on the left side is indexed with a tilde mark in the front of the name. And I then am presented a yellow warning box right above there. I'll say it's a yellow warning box, not a red stop sign, but this warning box tells us any student with that squiggly tilde mark in front of their name is potentially a non-conforming student. Non-conforming meaning that they're either taking the same level over again, or they're taking a level that is below a previously taken level. So this one is, we're taking reading level D. Maybe this person has already taken TABE 11 level D, and they should be taking 12D instead, or 12 or 11A. It could also be that I have previously taken level A and I should not be going down to take D. And again, these are a lot of recommendations, and I said should not be taking, because it's not that you are breaking a policy, it's more of a warning to double check that you are complying with the state policy regarding reusing a test level. In that yellow box, there's a link to a spreadsheet to review the information. So if I pull up that spreadsheet, it will tell me that in a certain, on the right-hand side, the last test a specific student took and the next possible test that they should be taking. So again, this is a separate sample from the front page, but this student on the very top line previously took level M back in June of 19. That's quite a while ago, so we don't have a rule about the time. State policies have rules about that, but TABE has to be flexible for all the states. We're just notifying you that they have previously taken in our system a TABE level M math test. Maybe you should look on the far right side at 11M or 11 or 12D or 11 or 12A as possible options if needed. So again, this is a tool to start making you aware of possible non-conforming areas within state policies within the online system. Also within TABE Online, we've had some updates to some of our reports. We have the main report that everybody usually uses is our individual profile report, and we'll pull that one up in a moment. We also have a portfolio report, which is a short summary of all the tests the student has taken in the system, but it is per student or per individual. And then if you do the locator test, you can access a locator report under the reporting menu. And then we have a couple of options for exporting. We can export out in a bulk state report or a program report. We have previously sent data to specific schools within Florida, and in other states, we send the reports right to the state level database. So I know a lot of programs in Florida use Focus, and we could post an electronic file for Focus to come download on a nightly basis for that as an option. That's available for TABE 11 and 12 and will shortly be available for TABE Class-E, so you would not have to hand enter scores in. And if you need more information on that, I'll have both my information and Christine's at the end of the presentation. We can discuss that exporting, automatic exporting out. Here it says at a state level, but we can also do that at the program level as well. You always have the option to do a local export within the portal for TABE Online. You can export out to your own Excel file and import that into a database or a spreadsheet that you would like to sort and use. So you have that option to do as well. Moving to that individual profile report that we mentioned, again, some recent updates to the profile report is that we added a measurable skills gain column on the far right side in the top corner. That measurable skills gain column I wanted to make aware of, it is measuring your NRS level. Did your NRS level go up from a previous test? And in this case, the very first line is a yes. And so that means that this student has previously tested in reading and their NRS level was 3 or below, and now this score of 4 is an improvement, and so we mark that as a yes. What I want to point out about this measurable skills gain is that it does go back to just July 1st of that program year. So you'll notice that this report, the test date is October 25th. So what this report is saying is that sometime between July 1st of 18 and October 25th of 18, this student previously tested in reading and was a 3 or below, and now this score of 4 equals a measurable skills gain. We had to standardize on July 1st as the program year. I do realize that many states allow you to carry over late testing, whether it's in May or June, and count that as into the new program year, but every state is different on that policy, so we had to standardize just on the program year of July 1st. At the bottom of the page, we see we've added the point values for each individual content area. And what the point values will show us on here is, I'll focus on reading. Key ideas and details, there's 18 questions worth 18 points. Craft and structure, 17 questions worth 20 points. So what that's telling us is that there's 3 2-point questions on this level M test in craft and structure. And then integration of knowledge and ideas, 5 questions, 4 points, so 4 more 2-point questions in there. Also tells us that key ideas and details in craft and structure are the majority of the test. If we were to look at the blueprint, key ideas and details would be the largest pies on that pie chart. So the left-hand side of the bottom of this chart correlates directly to the blueprints that are posted on our website. You'll notice out here on the far right that this student did very well on the reading test and has full proficiency for reading. The way that you want to interpret this report is that I don't have full proficiency for reading, I have full proficiency of reading at level M of TABE. So knowing that there's more levels above level M, I am not proficient in reading, I'm proficient in reading as measured at level M of TABE. So it's just a slight distinction there on how to interpret the data on the report. This report also has a couple of extra pages added. The second and third and fourth pages will include the demonstrated skills or the areas of next focus. This is their strengths and their weaknesses related back to those domain areas from the College and Career Readiness Standards. So again, the first one is key ideas and details. I have strengths because I did very well on the test. Because I was at full proficiency, my areas of next focus are level D skills. Because I have no more growth on level M, I want to start looking at what my areas of next focus are for level D. That would be different if my performance category was partial or non-proficiency. Then my areas of next focus are directly related to the areas on level M that I need to have additional work on. So again, always paying attention to how proficient that student was, if they were at full proficiency, knowing that the areas of next focus are projecting up to the next level of TABE. Looking at remote testing, there are two options for remote testing. One option is to use your own webinar and use your own staff for proctoring. You can proctor the locator also in a non-proctored environment. So that is allowed by DRC. If you want to do the locator first, you can send out locator test information with a link to the locator. All the information is in the remote proctoring guidelines examiner instructions. You can also remote proctor both 11 and 12 and Class-E in groups of 5 or less students per webinar. There's also the option to use ProctorU as a remote proctoring service. There is an additional fee, for ProctorU. We do pass on the cost that ProctorU charges for the proctoring services. So that was that order form that I pointed out prior on the previous screen within our website if you want to access the ProctorU services. You would still use TABE Online to register students into test sessions, but after the student is registered, then you're providing the ProctorU website the student's email address, and then the student will take over with setting up an appointment with ProctorU to take their exam. After their exam is taken, you as a program would receive an invoice from DRC on a monthly basis for the proctoring services that were performed that month. On the website, there's also on our main page, not just under the resource tab, references for remote proctoring. There's always an examiner guide and a student guide. So all of our instructions are separated for what do the proctors or the examiners need to know, and then also what do the students need to know. Many programs will email out the PDF file for the students because it does go step by step. And so that is a great tool. Also, programs will hold their own orientation webinars and go through the proctoring process first. We have a device check that's new for remote proctoring as well. One of the biggest questions is, are the students' home computers going to be capable of delivering a TABE test? You can go to drcdevicecheck.com. It will pull up a box that's on the bottom of the screen and it says run test. If I click on that link, it will open up the run test and very quickly tell me that my computer has either passed or failed and I've changed my resolution, so I've failed for the TABE test because I'm using the webinar. But I can go through all the requirements. Instead of you asking the students, what version of Chrome do you have? What operating system are you using? How much memory do you have? You can just use the device check to go through all of that and then quickly find out ahead of time if that works for the students. This is a website that you want to cut and paste specifically. So again, you don't want to use any shortened links for this. You want to have the www with it and the drcdevicecheck.com when you send that out. And as I mentioned, here's the passing screen. If a student's computer can run the TABE testing system. A little bit more into ProctorU, just to review the prices. And again, these are the proctoring fees that are in addition to the TABE testing fees. So if you were to do option 1 and proctor through your own WebEx or Zoom account, there is no additional fee. That service is not going away, so we will continue to have both options available for TABE testing, but there are programs that would prefer that have teachers that are sometimes their proctor. They would prefer to have the teachers do teaching and have proctor you do the proctoring, so that service is available based on what tests you are delivering. There are fees associated with that. The order form on the website, you would fill out your setting up a billing account based on how many proctored assignments you're estimating. It does not have to be an accurate number, but some purchasing offices require that it has to be within a certain amount, and so we provide that in our ordering form. Again, if you have any questions on remote proctoring, you can either put them in the chat or share them at the Q&A at the end as well. I'll move to our new test for TABE 11 and 12. It's our writing test. TABE 11 and 12 writing was released in February. It is only available for in-person testing, so not on paper and not on remote at this time, just in-person testing. It is also going through the NRS approval process now, so once it has that approval, we'll go ahead and make that announcement. So this would not be used for marking a measurable skills gain at this point, although that shows up on the report. It's not trackable in the state system as of yet. The writing test is a little different, that it does not use a locator, but it is applicable for anybody that's testing into levels M, D, or A. So if you've tested into M, D, or A, you'd be able to assign the writing test to that student. And then similar to Class-E, it does use a local educator scoring for the rubric on the essay portion. The writing test is 15 multiple choice questions, and then either a formative or argumentative essay, depending on if you're taking 11 or 12 of the writing test. As we get more information on the NRS approval, and then in Florida specifically getting the board approval, we'll make those announcements, but currently it's there as a resource for programs that are looking for a measurement in writing skills. If you're still testing with paper and pencil for TABE 11 and 12, that is not going away. But we do strongly encourage you to use our free scanning and scoring service. In TABE 9 and 10, it was not a free service, and many programs chose to hand score to reduce cost, but we eliminated the need for the test-made software, and we eliminated the need for the expensive Scantron scanners, so now you can use more affordable image-based scanners that you may already have for document retrieval. If not, there's a list of scanners that are available on the slide. The scanning service goes directly into the same database that TABE Online uses. So if we are talking about transferring scores over to Focus, then we could do that both with online testing and the paper and pencil test as long as they've been scanned. TABE Class-E will also start using the scanning service in the future. It's being developed. They're moving away from the test-made software now and using the scanning feature, local scanning in the future for Class-E as well. Speaking of TABE Class-E, we have a couple of updates to talk about. The national standards or national guidelines for ESOL have changed from the Department of Education. They have new NRS descriptors. Currently, there's no assessments that are aligned to those new descriptors, so they're not in use from the Department of Education yet. But we are actively updating Class-E to align to those new descriptors. The good part of that is that there's not going to be a lot of change in Class-E. We've done an alignment with the objectives, and our objectives align to the new competencies and new descriptors from the NRS. We are in the process of updating some of the items on the test, some of the questions. So in TABE Class-E Online, just like in TABE 11 and 12, there are a few unscored questions. Those unscored questions are being field tested for the new version of Class-E that will go through the federal NRS approval process later this fall and become active probably the middle of next year. So not much will change from what the platform and the format of the test. Will still have reading, listening, writing, and speaking. We will just have new updated questions later next year after the federal approval goes through. As I mentioned, Class-E Online uses the same platform as TABE 11 and 12, so you have familiarity with that both from the administrative side and from the student side, so they experience the same platform and the same tutorial for that. And as I mentioned, the reporting, we've updated the reports this week a little bit. There's some more updates happening next week, and we'll look at that a little bit more, and also having the ability to export that data out into a digital file for transmission to either state or local databases. This is a copy of the individual profile for Class-E, where at the very top is the student's name, Molly. Where she tested is in the gray shaded area. This happens to be the sample TABE school. And then the content areas on the left-hand side on what she tested on: reading, listening, writing, speaking. She did test on all different days, and that's certainly applicable for many programs. They may test over a week or so, or a couple of weeks, and you can certainly do that with both TABE 11 and 12 online and Class-E online. We have the number of points possible, the number correct in their scale scores, and at the bottom of the report is their proficiency rankings. The left-hand side, the domains, the quantitative literacy, the read words, and the reading comprehension will not be changing for the update. That's the area that will remain constant. The questions behind that will be getting refreshed for the new version of Class-E. We also have a pilot starting a few months ago in Texas for TABE Offline for programs typically in a correctional setting, but it could also be in programs that have limited internet connectivity. We have a new version of TABE that is a digital version of our paper and pencil testing that allows programs to test offline with the students if needed. It still does utilize our TABE portal from the administrative standpoint, so the administrator still has internet connectivity. They would register students typically on a laptop. They would take that laptop into a secured facility that doesn't have an internet connection, but hook it up to the network within that facility, deliver the test out to the testing computers through that laptop. And then once the students are done, they can take that laptop back to the administrative area, connect it to the portal again, and upload the responses and the results for scoring for that test. So the administrative side still happens online, but the testing side can happen offline. And again, we started a pilot in February. It's going very well in Texas. We're working to start expanding that pilot out for other programs. So again, if you're interested in looking at offline versions of TABE testing for 11 and 12, I would encourage you to get in contact with Christine for more information related to that. The next area is to look at a sample of the offline. And again, it's a little bit different than the online test because it is a digital version of our test booklet. So on the left-hand side of this screen, we see the page from the test booklet. And on the right-hand side, we have the active area for the answer sheet. So our digital offline version of TABE is an active bubble sheet on the right-hand side that they are marking their responses. This happens to be a sample practice question, so it's not a secure item, but they would look at question number 1 and then go ahead and mark the answer. When they go to the next page, you'll notice on this page, we only have questions 1 and 2. Question 3 would be on the next page. So the student would go to the next page, but the answer sheet would still stay here with questions 3 and 4. So a little bit of a different look and feel because of the low bandwidth requirements of the offline system, but allows programs to test on the computer to eliminate any scoring, hand scoring or scanning, and use computer-based testing even in a correctional setting that they might have limited or no internet connectivity. One piece of research that we've recently released is our TABE to high school equivalency correlation. And this correlation was done after the collection of a lot of data from many states on students that had taken a TABE test and then also taken a high school equivalency test. And then we correlated those scores for the different passing zones for each high school equivalency test. This full chart is again on our website under the resources, but this is the reading chart from that concordance study. And what it's showing us is that a TABE score of 536 would equal, and again, 536 on level M or above, would equal a minimal passing score on the high school equivalency test. So GED is used in Florida. So we see that score of 145 for the GED is the threshold, and a scale score of 536 on a TABE level M or above would demonstrate a likelihood of a student passing that GED test at that minimal level. Moving up to the orange area in that secondary cut score from GED, that college ready score, we see students that are in the 627 range for TABE reading, and again, that's on level D or above, would demonstrate a likelihood of achieving that secondary cut score, and then 721 and above for that highest level of the GED, that college credit score from the GED. So using this, again, we want to be careful on what we're saying. I truly understand that most students want to come to your programs and get their GED. What the U.S. Department of Education wanted when they redid the college and career readiness standards was to have students be able to succeed after achieving their high school equivalency. So if I get my GED by minimally passing at a 536 on TABE, I'm demonstrating that I'm getting through high school with C's and D's. If I get the 721 on TABE and eligible for that college plus credit, that's similar to those students that may take several AP courses in high school and be better prepared for the post-secondary rigors or the workforce career track that they may go into. They both get the same high school equivalency credential. One is just better prepared. And the goal of the Department of Education when they created college and career readiness standards was to have students try to stay in adult ed programs so that they can take advantage of the programs that are available to them at free or limited costs, and then be able to succeed upon exiting. If I took my GED at a 536 of TABE, yes, I might pass, but if I was to then transition over to the colleges and I have to take a placement test, that placement test is likely going to place me in a remedial course where I'm taking that for not for credit, and where I could have maybe stayed in my adult ed program a little bit longer and not have to take that remedial course and pay financial aid for that course. So we have to always be conscious of minimally passing or being successful and succeeding upon exit of the program. And that was the goal under the new college and career readiness standards that the NRS is based off of. So there's always a lot of questions. Why is TABE seem to be more rigorous than the GED or than high school equivalency requirements? And it's because of the NRS requirements go above and beyond simply passing the high school equivalency. That is not the end point from the U.S. Department of Education. That is a step in the process, but being better prepared for either a career workforce program or a post-secondary program is the goal of the standards. The chart for reading and math are both posted to the website, so you can look at that full concordance report that is available on our website. And the last piece I want to talk about is just one that's still underway. We are working for an ability to benefit approval for TABE 11 and 12. That ability to benefit is a federal approval that comes from the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Financial Aid. So a little bit different than the Office of Adult Education that does the NRS program. But this allows students to achieve a TABE score and then have access to federal financial aid without having that high school diploma or high school equivalency. So it's a great tool for students that want to either enroll or dual enroll into programs or enroll into a post-secondary program. Colleges will have the ability to use TABE 11 and 12 scores in the hopefully near future. We've been going through the approval process. We unfortunately sent it in right at the start of COVID in all work kind of stopped for almost a year within the Department of Education on this side of the program. But we're back now to answering some questions on our application, and we would expect to have approval in the near future. Once we do have that approval, we'll certainly make that announcement and make more information available about ability to benefit. I'm going to go to the next screen, which has both my information and Christine's information if you do need to contact us in any way. Also has our support team number. If you have any questions with TABE Online from a technical standpoint, you can contact support. There's no additional cost for the support team. And if you have ordering questions or fulfillment questions, our customer service team can help with that as well. I'm going to check the Q&A and the chat for any questions that may be happening. I see there's a question about the score reports taking extra time. And that certainly was a concern of ours, especially a few weeks ago. We saw the reports taking a longer time. I will tell you that the threshold within our system is 15 minutes. If you see reports taking longer than 15 minutes, I would encourage you to contact our support team so they can log that and get it looked at. Typically, the average time is 5 to 7 minutes, but a few weeks ago, I know that there were some issues happening with the database, that it was taking longer than 15 minutes to have reports generated. If you ever have a need for an urgent score, I'm going to switch over real quick back to our website, but instead of going to our public website, I'm going to go to the portal and log in for our TABE Online portal. If you're using TABE Online, you're very familiar with the portal, and I'm going to go to our menu option, and typically you go down to the report delivery menu, and most often you're running the on-demand reports to get to that individual profile. If you need a score urgently and you don't want to wait the 5 to 7 minutes or the 15 minutes, hopefully you're not waiting more than 15 minutes and we're operating as planned. But the on-demand extract, the one right next to it, allows you to pull up an Excel report. And I have to type in a program name because I have many programs listed, but I'll go down here and just pick, oops. I can pick Miami-Dade College. I'll pick public schools. And I could go to and quickly pull up today's scores. There's a setting for today, yesterday, this week, this month, or if you want to choose a date range, I'm not going to pull up any of their data, but I could pull up their scores. These spreadsheets in this extract are generated as soon as the student is done. There is no wait time for the Excel version of the data. Now, you do not get the strengths and weaknesses that the PDF report has, but you do get the immediate score if you have an immediate need for a score. Looking at and another question that would related back to the timing of the report. So again, if I know a couple of weeks ago they had some trouble with turnaround time, but I think that's been fixed. And if it's still occurring for you, I encourage you to contact our support team. And another question about if you're using the paper test and you scan them, are all the reports available? And yes, all the same reports from TABE Online are available. Both the data extract, the individual reports, the group reports are all available if you're scanning your paper answer sheets. And then let me see, I think we have one more question. Question about sharing the presentation. That's certainly, it's already available on the IPDAY portal. I think it's here in the webinar under the downloads, I believe as well. So you have access to that as well. I'm going to move my slide to our last slide. Let me get there real quick and turn this back to June so she can wrap up for us. But I want to thank you for today and the opportunity to provide some TABE updates to you. And certainly if you have any questions, we're open to discussing those after we're done today. Thank you, June.
Mike, Christine, thank you so much. I also want to remind you that Lisa Williams is your contact person at the Florida Department of Education. So now you're going to be viewing a feedback slide that's going to come up. If you would please take a minute to answer these 3 short questions pertaining to today's webinar, we would really appreciate your feedback on that. as you're doing that, I will remind you of next week's webinar on April 14th. This webinar is titled Teaching Mathematical Inequalities Virtually Using Nearpod. So I think you're really going to find this interesting, and the session will focus on how teachers can balance content and strategies while continuing to instruct adult students even in a virtual environment. So you won't want to miss it. So thank you again so much for participating today. We hope to see all of you next week, and stay well.
June, I'm sorry, June.
Mike?
Is
Yes.
it possible that I provide one other piece of advice? There was
Yes,
a couple
please.
of comments that the
Go.
slowness of the reports were going on more than a few weeks ago. And one of the things I failed to mention, I just thought of, is that within our test sessions, one of the guidelines from our support team is always to have your test sessions with no more than 50 students in them. So that may be another area to check. Certainly that will be an area that our support team will check. So if you are having slowness of the system, I would want you to double check how many students are in the session. They will hold more than 50, but things start to get slow when you have more than 50 in a session for that.
Good advice.
Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.